I froze mid-step. A voice, soft and deliberate, drifted from the next room. Can you imagine if she doesn't know what's at stake? Another chuckle. I'm sure she'll give us what we need. My hand trembled slightly on the doorknob. I wasn't meant to hear this. I wasn't supposed to exist in this conversation. But I did. And in that instant, everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust began to unravel. Have you ever stepped into a room thinking it was a dinner, only to discover it was a trap? Stay with me. Because what I heard that night didn't just shock me, it changed my life, my engagement, and my entire understanding of people I thought I could trust. My name is Aurora Lane. I'm 34, living in a penthouse in Soho, New York. Minimalistic design, concrete floors, sunlight streaming through glass walls, a rooftop garden where lavender and orchids bloom. My net worth? Over $35 million. Yet I choose simplicity, plain mugs, worn leather sofa, old travel books stacked neatly. Nothing flashy. My fiancé, Julian Reed, 36, lives in Scarsdale, New York, with his parents, Vanessa and Charles Reed. Their 15,000 square foot mansion is the definition of opulence: imported marble, crystal chandeliers, antique Persian rugs, sprawling gardens with fountains, a private tennis court. Every corner screams wealth and control, curated to impress, to signal status. I arrived for dinner in disguise: simple black coat, worn flats, a plain crossbody bag, hair tied loosely, minimal makeup. Invisible. Underestimated. My plan: see them for who they really are before revealing myself. Dinner was scheduled at 7:30 p.m. in the Reed's grand dining hall. The table, polished mahogany, was set with fine china edged in gold, sparkling crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of lilies and orchids, too large, almost oppressive. Candles flickered softly, filling the room with a warm, almost theatrical glow. Vanessa's smile was sharp, practiced. Charles stood quietly, arms folded, assessing me like a subject under a microscope. Julian looked nervous beside me, whispering, "They'll love you." But his eyes betrayed doubt. I sat down, nodding politely, my mind scanning everything: every ornament, every reflection in the mirrors, every subtle gesture, the way Vanessa adjusted her pearls as if they were shields, the way Charles's eyes lingered on my coat, my bag, my hands. I excused myself to the restroom, ostensibly to freshen up. From the hallway, I overheard Vanessa and Charles. "Do you think she's aware of her net worth?" Vanessa murmured. Charles chuckled low. "Doesn't matter. We just need to see how far she'll go. There's a lot we could. Leverage." Leverage. My stomach tightened. They weren't talking about me as a person. They were calculating, planning, seeing me as a resource, a tool. I returned to the table with a composed smile, sipping water, keeping my expression neutral. Julian seemed oblivious to what I had just heard. I watched them carefully. Every word, every glance, every subtle signal of greed and entitlement. I didn't confront them yet. Not tonight. I had to see the full picture. I thought about my life, my choices. My wealth had never been about showing off. I never needed to prove myself with possessions. But now, here in this lavish room, I realized money could be a spotlight revealing true character. And tonight, I would see exactly who they were. I allowed a single thought to surface. If this is what my life with Julian would be, if these are the people I would have to navigate forever, I needed answers, and fast. The first course arrived: seared scallops with delicate microgreens, the aroma wafting across the table. I placed my fork down, watching, waiting, listening. And I knew one thing with certainty: by the end of the night, everything would change. Either I would step back, or I would reveal the truth in a way they'd never forget. The candlelight flickered across Vanessa's polished cheekbones, highlighting the sharpness in her smile. Every movement she made was deliberate, controlled, rehearsed, the kind of control that could suffocate a room. Charles leaned back slightly in his chair, hands folded, his eyes calculating, scanning me with the precision of a man used to acquiring what he wanted. The dining hall seemed alive, but not with warmth, with anticipation. Like a trap snapping shut. Julian tried to break the tension. "Aurora, would you like some wine?" His voice was careful, polite, but underneath it ran a trace of nervous energy, like a boy hoping his parents would approve of the girl he loved. I shook my head lightly. No, thank you. Water is fine. Charles made a small noise of disapproval, almost dismissive. Water, he muttered under his breath, as if the very choice revealed a flaw. I smiled faintly, letting it slide. Let them underestimate me. The first course had barely been cleared when Vanessa leaned slightly toward Charles, speaking in a whisper that was meant to be private. Only I had learned to listen. She seems careful, Vanessa said. I wonder if she knows the implications. If she sees what she's stepping into. Charles's chuckle was low and deliberate, a sound that crawled along my spine. She'll find out soon enough. But for now, observe. Observe how much she'll give, how much she'll bend. Bend? Give? I sat very still, holding my fork, my expression neutral. I felt a cold surge through me, a warning bell in my chest. This wasn't hospitality. This was a calculation. Every compliment, every smile was a measurement, a weighing of how I could be manipulated, exploited, or tested. Julian, oblivious, laughed at something trivial I said, his hand brushing mine on the table. I felt the warmth of his touch, but my mind was alert. My ears tuned to every whisper, every glance. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward my crossbody bag. I noticed. She noted the worn leather, the slight fraying at the edges. Charles noticed too. Subtle nods passed between them, like secret signals only they understood. Their wealth wasn't just money, it was armor, a weapon, and a lens through which they judged the world. You must understand, Vanessa continued, leaning closer to Charles. She has potential. We could secure her family fortune, easily. I froze. Potential. My fortune. Their words, so casual, so matter-of-fact, laid bare the truth. They were not here to meet me. They were here to assess my value, my wealth, my power. Julian smiled at me, radiant and unaware. Is everything okay? He whispered, eyes full of trust. I nodded slowly, giving him a soft smile. Everything's fine. Just soaking in the atmosphere. I let them believe I was naive, unaware. That night, I wore invisibility like armor. Every laugh, every polite nod, every delicious was a mask. They saw me as soft, pliable, ignorant, exactly as I had planned. Dessert arrived, a delicate panna cotta with raspberries, the tart sweetness mingling with cream, a perfect balance of flavor and elegance. Vanessa's eyes flickered to the crystal sugar bowl, then to my hands. Charles leaned back again, crossing one leg over the other, fingers drumming against the polished wood. Do you know how fortunate you are, Aurora? Vanessa asked, voice saccharine, dripping with faux charm. I tilted my head, curious. Fortunate. Oh yes, she purred. To have Julian. To be welcomed into a family like ours. Some girls would do anything to be in your place. I smiled faintly, letting a trace of amusement pass through. But inside, a storm raged. They were speaking as if I were a prize, an acquisition, a stepping stone. And they didn't care about me, only what they could gain. Julian's hand brushed mine again. He had no idea. He still believed his parents were kind, loving, perfect. The man I loved was blind to the reality sitting across from him. And I couldn't let him stay blind forever. The whispers continued, soft, fragmented. She could fund so many ventures for us. Imagine the possibilities. She has no idea. She trusts us blindly. I placed my fork down. I didn't need to hear more. I had seen the truth. The engagement, the love, the promises, all could be manipulated by greed and calculation. My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from clarity. I glanced at Julian. His eyes shone with love, excitement, innocence. I almost spoke, almost told him to open his eyes. But no. Patience. Observation. Strategy. Tonight, I had to see everything, and they had to reveal themselves fully. The dining hall's grandeur, the soft golden light, the smell of roasted meats, and the faint scent of expensive perfume, it all became a stage. And they were performers. Actors playing family. but I saw through them. Every gesture, every whisper, every concealed smirk was a threat, and I was ready to pull it all apart. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their wealth, their pride, their arrogance. I felt my own calm power beneath my simple coat, my old flats, my worn bag. They thought me powerless. They thought me naive. They were wrong. By the time the coffee arrived, I had made my decision. I would not just leave, nor would I quietly endure. They would see the truth. Not in words, not in polite correction, in full, undeniable revelation. That night would end differently than they expected. By the end, Julian would see, I would be seen, and the Reeds would never forget the woman they had underestimated. I sipped my coffee, eyes steady, voice calm, masking the storm inside. The game had begun. The clink of silverware seemed louder now, echoing against the high ceilings of the Reed dining hall. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap, fingers tracing the worn edge of my old leather bag that hung from the chair behind me. Julian's eyes kept darting between me and his parents, a subtle furrow on his brow that suggested he sensed tension, but he still didn't know the truth. Vanessa leaned forward again, her voice low, conspiratorial. Imagine what we could do with her connections, Charles. One word from us, and half of her investments could be directed our way. She's perfect, naive, trusting, unaware. It's effortless. Charles smiled, a slow, calculating smile that chilled me to my core. Yes, we must play it carefully. She cannot know the extent of what we expect. But it's clear she'll comply. All women in love do. I pressed my lips together, barely containing the surge of anger that rose within me. Their words were poison, spoken as if I were an object to be used. Not a person. Not a human being with thoughts, dreams, and dignity. A tool. A bank account. Julian reached across the table, brushing my hand again. His touch was warm, comforting, unaware that his parents were plotting, assessing, and planning exploitation. I turned my hand slightly, letting my fingers linger on his. Julian, do you hear them? I asked softly, but just enough that only he could sense my tone. Hear who? He whispered, puzzled. I shook my head faintly, smiling. Nothing. I was just thinking aloud. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, subtle suspicion flickering across her face. She leaned back, tucking a strand of perfectly coiffed hair behind her ear. Do you know what she said? Charles asked, curious, almost mockingly. She is too careful, Vanessa replied. I don't trust her yet. But soon, she'll reveal herself, her true compliance, her willingness to give. We just need patience. I froze. Every carefully controlled thought in my mind crystallized into one absolute clarity. This family was dangerous to anyone who truly cared for Julian. Their love, their concern, all a veneer, a mask to hide manipulation. I glanced at Julian again. His eyes shone with trust, hope, and innocence. He had no idea that his parents' admiration for me was entirely transactional, that their idea of love was measured in money, control, and advantage. Dinner ended, dessert cleared, and coffee placed before us. I stood, feeling the weight of the room press against me like a tangible thing. The air smelled faintly of roasted almonds and vanilla, but it was suffocating. I breathed in slowly, tasting the last remnants of sweetness, and exhaled deliberately. Julian, I said softly, my voice calm but firm. I need to step outside for a moment. His brow furrowed, but he nodded. Of course, Aurora. I'll be right here. I walked toward the door, each step measured, deliberate. Vanessa and Charles's eyes followed me, suspicion evident now, though they didn't yet understand the gravity of what was about to unfold. The moment I stepped into the hallway, away from the dining room's gilded walls, I pulled my coat tighter around me, adjusting the worn leather bag to conceal what they had underestimated. Julian's parents had never seen me without the carefully curated mask of deference, politeness, and compliance. And now, they were about to. Returning to the table, I allowed a subtle shift in posture, a controlled shift in demeanor that exuded quiet power. Charles leaned forward slightly. Aurora, he called, curiosity mingled with suspicion. I sat down slowly, meeting his gaze with unflinching calm. Yes, I said. I think it's time you see the woman you've been underestimating. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me, narrowing. What do you mean? I smiled faintly, letting just the barest edge of triumph curl my lips. I've enjoyed our dinner immensely. And I've listened. I've observed. I've heard everything, every whisper, every plan, every calculation. Charles's confident smirk faltered. A slight unease flickered in Vanessa's gaze. I'm not who you think I am, I continued, voice steady, measured. You see a quiet, polite woman. Someone naive, easy to manipulate, a prize to be acquired. But I'm not that woman. I am Aurora Kane, CEO of a company you've never even heard of, a woman whose net worth far exceeds anything you've imagined, and I own assets, properties, and investments that would dwarf everything in this room. The room froze. Julian's hand stilled on the table, eyes wide in shock. Vanessa's perfectly sculpted smile dissolved into a thin line. Charles's confident posture shifted into disbelief, then anger. You? What? Vanessa whispered, voice sharp, unsteady. You underestimated me, I said softly, letting the words hang in the room like a verdict. And in doing so, you revealed your true selves. You are not kind. You are not generous. You are greedy, calculating, and willing to exploit anyone you see as an opportunity. Julian's parents looked at each other, their carefully constructed facade cracking. Aurora, Charles began, but I raised a hand to silence him. No, I said firmly. You don't get to explain. You don't get to spin your way out of what you've revealed about your character tonight. I came here to meet my fiancé's family. And instead, I discovered who you truly are. Julian reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. His eyes sought reassurance, understanding. I squeezed his hand lightly, offering a small, comforting smile. I am here, Julian. I am safe. And I am still the woman you love. But I cannot and will not marry into a family that values money over decency. Vanessa's lips pressed into a tight line. Charles's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. The storm of their arrogance met the calm fury of my truth. I have nothing further to say, I concluded, except that you will remember this night, every whispered plan, every greedy thought, every attempt to manipulate. And you will live with the knowledge that you underestimated me. With that, I stood, walked past them, and left the dining hall. The echo of my heels on the polished floor felt like a drumbeat of liberation. Julian followed quietly, respect and awe in his eyes, while Vanessa and Charles were left staring, stunned, exposed, powerless. Outside, the night air hit me like freedom. I inhaled deeply, savoring the clarity, the justice, the truth finally spoken. Julian's hand slipped into mine, grounding me. I had no idea, he whispered, voice trembling with awe. I did, I replied softly. And now you know too. And with that, the engagement ended before it could truly begin, not with shame or fear, but with honesty, revelation, and power reclaimed. The night air was crisp as Julian and I walked along the quiet streets, our footsteps echoing softly against the cobblestones. The city lights reflected off the puddles left from an afternoon drizzle, painting the sidewalks with splashes of amber and gold. Julian's hand still held mine, tight, as if anchoring me to the moment, to the reality that he now truly knew who I was, who I had always been, beyond the carefully constructed illusion of meekness and modesty. I can't believe what just happened, Julian murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. I never imagined. Your parents, your fortune. I mean, your life, Aurora. I didn't know. I squeezed his hand lightly. That's because you've only ever known the part of me I let the world see. And that's the point. Tonight wasn't about money or status. It was about truth. About seeing the people I might marry into for what they truly are. Julian shook his head, a mixture of disbelief and pride in his expression. Your parents, your family, they must have been stunned. I've never seen Vanessa so speechless. Charles, he looked like he wanted to explode. I smiled faintly, recalling the expressions at the dinner table. They were. And that's exactly what I intended. I needed to see them without their masks to confirm everything I had suspected. And now you see the truth too. We reached a small park near Julian's apartment. A lone lamppost illuminated the wrought iron bench where we sat, puddles of light shimmering around us. Julian's gaze followed mine as I took a deep breath, savoring the calm after the storm. So, what now? He asked. His tone was hesitant, unsure, as if the weight of the evening pressed down on both of us. Now, I said, we reflect. We decide what we want our lives to look like, free from manipulation, free from people who value wealth over integrity. Your parents, Vanessa and Charles, they have revealed themselves fully. And I won't marry into a family like that. But you, Julian, you can choose who you are. He nodded slowly. I understand. And I want. I want to be someone who values the right things, who respects people for who they are, not what they have. I've learned tonight how easily I could have been blind to what really matters. I reached into my bag, pulling out a small, worn notebook I always carried. Its leather cover was scratched and soft from years of use, a stark contrast to the polished marble and velvet of the Reed mansion. I've kept this for years, I said. It's full of reflections, lessons, and observations from my life. Some are about business, some about people, some about choices. And tonight, one lesson becomes clearer than all the rest. Power is not money. Influence is not wealth. Real power comes from integrity, from understanding yourself, from knowing your worth without needing validation from the greedy or the manipulative. Julian leaned closer, curiosity flickering in his eyes. May I see it? I handed him the notebook. His fingers traced the worn leather before opening it, revealing pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. This is incredible, he whispered. All this, and I never knew? You've carried this wisdom with you always. Yes, I said, and now I share it with you. Not because I expect you to follow blindly, but so that you can see what's possible when you live intentionally, when you refuse to be controlled by fear or greed or obligation. He closed the notebook slowly, his eyes meeting mine. Aurora, thank you for showing me, for trusting me, for being you. I've never been more certain about anything in my life than I am about this moment. A breeze swept through the park, rustling the wet leaves on the ground. It was a gentle reminder that life moved on, regardless of dinner table dramas or family scheming. I watched Julian's face, so open, so earnest, and I felt a deep, unshakable calm. You know, I said, sometimes we pretend to be smaller than we are to test the world, to see who we can trust, who will value us for who we are, not for what we possess. And tonight, I saw clearly. Vanessa and Charles will never change. But that's not my burden anymore. It's yours if you let it be, or you can choose to be different. Julian nodded slowly. I choose differently, he said firmly. I choose honesty. I choose respect. And I choose to build a life that's not about appearances or money, but about real love and understanding. I smiled, feeling the weight of years of restraint finally lift. Then we're aligned. And that makes all the difference. We stood, walking back toward his apartment. The streets were quiet now, only a few night owls and stray cats moving under the lamplights. The city seemed to breathe around us, alive yet indifferent, and I felt a strange peace settle in my chest. Freedom, clarity, truth, all converging in one night that had begun with deceit, but ended in revelation. As we approached his door, Julian paused, turning to me. Aurora, I know this night changed everything, but thank you. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me see the truth and for letting me be part of it. I love you more than I can say. I placed my hand on his cheek, a soft, grounding touch. I love you too, Julian. But not for what you have, or what your parents have, or the world's expectations. I love you for who you are. And that is worth more than any fortune or family name. Inside his apartment, we settled quietly, the night pressing gently against the windows. I allowed myself to relax, knowing that the path forward was clear, no illusions, no pretenses, no compromises of integrity. Julian and I had chosen our own reality. And tonight, We had chosen truth. The next morning, I woke to a quiet apartment, the sunlight slipping through the sheer curtains in soft golden streaks. The coffee I brewed steamed gently in my favorite porcelain mug, filling the air with warmth. My thoughts, however, were far from calm. Last night had ended with clarity, yet the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Julian was due to meet his parents today, and I had insisted on giving him space to face them on his own. But as I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed insistently. It was Julian. Aurora, his text read. They're calling me nonstop. They want answers. They're furious. I don't know what to say. I took a deep breath and typed back, say the truth. Stand firm. Protect yourself. Protect what matters to you. Within the hour, the front doorbell rang. My heart skipped. Could it be them? But no, it was just the building manager delivering a package. Still, I felt the invisible pull of tension, the lingering dread of confrontation. Julian's parents, Vanessa and Charles Whitman, were not the kind of people who accepted limits. They demanded control. By mid-afternoon, Julian returned from a tense meeting with them. His expression was grave, almost haunted. Aurora, you were right. They're relentless. Charles called me a fool, said I'd thrown away our family's legacy. Vanessa accused me of being ungrateful, of betraying them. I listened silently, taking in every word, noting the sharpness in Julian's tone. And how did you respond? I asked softly. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had seen when he was wrestling with impossible choices. I told them I loved them, but I could no longer accept manipulation. I told them that their wealth, their influence, their judgment, none of that matters if it destroys the people they claim to love. And then, I told them I was done. The weight in his words sank deep in my chest. Done. He had chosen honesty and autonomy over submission. That was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the illusion of obedience was shattered. They were shocked, Julian continued. Vanessa started crying, not out of remorse, but out of indignation. Charles, he slammed the phone down and refused to speak for hours. They're furious, Aurora. Absolutely furious. I let out a quiet, controlled laugh, the sound almost foreign in the serene apartment. Good. Let them be furious. Let them see the cost of their own cruelty. You've drawn boundaries, Julian. You've taken the first step in defining who are independent of their expectations. He sank into the couch beside me. But it's more complicated. They're trying to manipulate me, even guilt me. They keep reminding me of all they've done, all the money they've given, the houses, the trips, as if that entitles them to my obedience. I nodded, understanding the depth of their tactic. Classic emotional leverage. But remember, their money does not define your choices. Their gifts do not bind you to a life that compromises your values. You are free to choose dignity over subservience, love over obligation, truth over pretense. Julian's gaze softened, yet carried the lingering weight of family expectations. Aurora, I don't know if I can handle this on my own. You pretended to be poor last night to test them. I didn't have your foresight. I can feel their pressure, and it's overwhelming. I reached for his hand. You're not alone. That's why I'm here. But also, Julian, you must understand, part of growing is facing these tests without me holding the reins. They will challenge your convictions. They will push every limit to see if you crack. And you must not. You must be firm. Show them that wealth does not buy integrity, nor does fear control you. He nodded slowly, determination mingling with trepidation. And if they can't respect that, then you walk away, I said with quiet authority. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to protect them from their own flaws. Boundaries are a form of self-respect. If they refuse to honor them, it's their loss, not yours. We sat in a heavy silence, the only sounds the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chatter of city life beyond the window. And in that silence, I saw the transformation in Julian. The shadow of his parents' expectations was slowly lifting. The man I had loved for years was beginning to stand fully on his own. Tomorrow, I continued, you call them one last time. You make it clear, respect the boundaries or accept the distance. No threats, no apologies, no negotiations. just honesty. And whatever they choose, we will face it together. But tonight, rest. Let this night settle. Julian looked at me, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Aurora, I don't know how to thank you for showing me the truth. I don't know if I could have done this without your guidance, without your courage. I smiled, resting my head lightly against his shoulder. You don't need to thank me. You needed to see reality for yourself. And now you have. That is all the thanks anyone could ask for. Outside, the city began to glow in the late afternoon sun, the golden light spilling over the streets. It was as if the world itself acknowledged the small victories of truth, the quiet triumphs of integrity. I felt a strange serenity settle over me, a calm knowing that the evening's confrontation had not destroyed anything but false pretenses. Julian's hand tightened around mine. Aurora, I've made my decision. No more pretenses. No more bending. I choose truth. And I choose you. Always. I leaned in, letting a moment of gentle relief wash over me. The path ahead would not be easy. Vanessa and Charles would not relent. But for the first time, Julian was armed with the clarity and resolve to face them, to define himself on his own terms. And I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the lesson had been learned, the trap revealed, and our bond strengthened in fire and truth. That night, as the city lights blinked and hummed outside, I felt an unshakable sense of calm. We were ready, not just to face his parents, but to face life together, with honesty, with courage, and with unwavering integrity. The following evening, Julian and I arrived at the Whitman estate. The house stood at the top of a quiet hill in Ashford Heights, an immaculate Georgian mansion with manicured gardens and polished marble steps. Every detail screamed wealth: golden doorknobs, imported Italian vases, crystal chandeliers that caught the fading sunlight. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and expensive perfume, a curated scent meant to impress anyone who entered. I wore a simple but elegant navy dress, unpretentious, my hair loosely tied back. Julian was in a crisp shirt and trousers, understated, yet he carried himself with a confidence I had helped him build over the past days. Neither of us needed to flaunt wealth. We were here for truth, not approval. Vanessa Whitman opened the door before we could even knock. Her silk scarf draped perfectly over her shoulders, pearls glinting in the last rays of sun. Julian, Aurora, how nice of you to finally come, she said, her tone saccharine but strained, as though rehearsed. Charles Whitman appeared behind her, tall and imposing, wearing an expensive tailored suit. His eyes narrowed slightly, betraying the irritation he tried to mask. "We've been calling," he said curtly. "You could have spared us this drama." Julian inhaled, steadying himself. I could see his knuckles tighten around my hand, but he did not falter. "We've come to make things clear," he said, voice firm. "There will be no more manipulation, no emotional pressure, no attempts to control our lives. We love you, but we will no longer allow fear, guilt, or money to dictate our choices." Vanessa's lips parted in shock. "Excuse me? Control? Fear? Aurora, did you put him up to this?" she asked, her voice quivering between outrage and disbelief. I remained calm, letting the silence hang like a heavy curtain. "No, Mrs. Whitman." Julian came to this realization on his own. I simply encouraged him to see reality for what it is. Charles's face reddened. "Reality? You're twisting words. This is disrespectful. Everything we've done, everything we've given, this is how you repay us." Julian held my gaze, then turned to them both. "It's not about repayment. It's about integrity. We're not ungrateful. But being grateful does not mean being a puppet. Your wealth is yours. Our decisions are ours. If that hurts you, so be it. But we will not bend any longer." Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. "You'll regret this. Do you know what you're throwing away? The connections, the security, the lifestyle. Aurora, do you encourage this?" I met her gaze evenly. I encourage honesty and respect. And yes, I do encourage him to stand up for what is right. And if you cannot accept that, The only consequence is that our relationship will not bend to satisfy your insecurities or entitlement. A tense silence fell. Charles's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. Do you understand what you're doing? This is family. Family obeys family. Julian straightened, finally finding his voice fully. No, Charles. Family respects family. Love does not demand submission. And if you cannot respect boundaries, then you will have a distant relationship. That is our choice. Take it or leave it. Vanessa's face paled, the first crack in her controlled facade. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Words failed her. For once, she could not dictate, could not manipulate. I leaned slightly forward, my tone calm but pointed. And for the record, your perception of wealth as power, as leverage over others, it's not impressive. It's empty. Money buys comfort, not respect. Influence, not integrity. You've measured value in dollars and jewels, but the truth is, character is not for sale. Charles's eyes widened, a flicker of doubt crossing his otherwise rigid expression. But then he straightened, trying to reclaim authority. Aurora, you may think yourself clever, but wealth without loyalty is meaningless. You're playing a dangerous game. I smiled faintly. Dangerous? Perhaps. Necessary? Absolutely. I came here not to play games, but to reveal truth. You see, I never pretended to be poor to humiliate anyone. I did it to observe reality. And reality has spoken. The respect we deserve is ours to claim. Nothing you offer can replace honesty. Nothing you threaten can diminish it. Vanessa's hands trembled. You think this is over? This will ruin everything. I shook my head. It's only the beginning. For us, it's clarity, freedom, and peace. For you, it's an opportunity to reflect on your actions. Change is possible. Or not. The choice is yours. But make no mistake, we will not compromise our dignity, our integrity, or each other for fear, greed, or appearances. Julian's hand found mine. Together, we were a solid front, unyielding. The air in the Whitman mansion felt heavier, as if the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. We need time. Yes, I replied softly. Time is all that can help you see what truly matters. Charles exhaled sharply, stormed out of the room, muttering about disappointment and lost legacy. Vanessa slumped into a chair, silent, her face unreadable. Julian and I exchanged a glance. Mission accomplished, at least for now. As we left the mansion, the evening sky painted in shades of purple and gold, Julian let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Aurora, that was exhausting. But I feel free. I finally feel like myself. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Exactly. Freedom is never easy, but it's always worth it. The city below twinkled like stars in a sea of lights. And for the first time, the Whitman's wealth seemed meaningless, insignificant, compared to the clarity and strength we had gained. The night air was crisp as Julian and I walked down the marble steps of the Whitman estate, the mansion looming behind us like a gilded cage. The streetlights reflected off the polished sidewalks, and the distant hum of the city seemed muted compared to the storm that had just passed inside those walls. Julian's hand held mine tightly, his knuckles pale, but his gaze was steady. I can't believe how furious they were, he murmured, shaking his head. I've never seen Vanessa like that. She looked like she might cry or scream, or both. I smiled faintly. They're not used to being challenged. Their wealth has shielded them from reality for so long that even a small taste of truth feels like an attack. Julian laughed softly, though there was tension behind it. You weren't wrong. That was epic. I've never seen anyone stand up to them like you did. I never knew I had to. Most people never do, I replied. They're too busy pretending, too scared to risk confrontation. But sometimes, confrontation is the only way to see who people really are. The next morning, news came from the Whitman estate, though not through conventional means. Vanessa called Julian, but the tone of the conversation was tense, clipped, and defensive. I overheard only fragments, but the words were clear enough. How dare you? Ungrateful. Ruined everything. You'll regret this. Julian hung up the phone, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mom, it's chaos in there. They're blaming me, blaming each other, and part of me feels relieved. I sat down, watching him. Relief is natural. It means you finally freed yourself from expectations that never belonged to you. Julian exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. They didn't see it coming. None of it. And you. Aurora, I don't even know how to thank you. You gave me courage I didn't know I had. You already had it, I said softly. I just reminded you it existed. By mid-afternoon, the messages began arriving, terse notes from Vanessa, a mix of guilt and anger, Charles sending legal threats thinly veiled as concern for inheritance. Julian ignored them all. I understood why. Responding would only give them power, and power was precisely what they had been trying to wield for decades. Later, Julian and I met at a small cafe in Ashford Heights, one neither of us had been to before. It was modest, with exposed brick walls, wooden tables, and the smell of freshly ground coffee. The hum of conversation was warm and human, far from the cold, polished corridors of the Whitman mansion. Do you think they'll ever understand? Julian asked, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I shook my head. Understanding requires self-reflection, humility, and sometimes real loss. I won't pretend that Vanessa or Charles will reflect deeply overnight. But that's not our responsibility anymore. Julian leaned back, his gaze distant. I keep replaying the dinner in my head. Every word, every look. I can't believe how much I missed, how blind I was to their intentions. That's exactly why I staged it the way I did, I said. Sometimes, people need to see themselves without the filter they've grown comfortable behind. You saw them. Not the parents you wanted them to be, but the reality. And now you have a choice. Julian's eyes met mine, full of resolve. The wedding, we can't proceed. Not like this. Not while pretending. Not while their values are imposed on us. I can't do it. I won't do it. And I never want to feel like I owe my happiness to anyone's money or approval again. A surge of pride rose within me. Then you've made the right choice. It's painful, yes, but necessary. Freedom often comes with sacrifice. Julian nodded, swallowing hard. I feel free, but also guilty. I feel guilty for wanting this, for choosing our truth over their comfort. I keep thinking, am I heartless? I reached across the table, taking his hand. Not at all. Heartless is blind obedience. Heartless is pretending to be happy while sacrificing your values. You're choosing authenticity. That's brave, not cruel. We sat in silence, sipping our coffee, letting the ordinary world carry on around us. Outside, children laughed, cyclists whizzed past, and the aroma of baked bread floated from a nearby bakery. For the first time in weeks, Julian's shoulders relaxed, and I could see the tension of years of conditioning begin to unravel. Later that evening, I received a message from Vanessa. Aurora, we need to talk. Can you forgive me? I read the message twice, then put my phone down. Julian was watching me curiously. They're reaching out, I said, but not for reflection, for control. I'll respond when it's clear they understand their role, not before. Julian nodded. I trust you, Mom. Always. I smiled. And I trust you, son. Always. The night settled softly over Ashford Heights. The mansion on the hill remained lit, its golden windows now distant and powerless. And for the first time, I felt truly certain the wedding was never about pleasing anyone but ourselves. And by refusing to bow to greed and pretension, we had reclaimed something far more valuable: our integrity, our peace, our life on our own terms. The morning sun spilled golden light across Ashford Heights, but the warmth outside did little to penetrate the chill of my thoughts. I sat at my oak desk, the soft hum of my apartment around me, yet my mind remained focused on the Whitmans, their arrogance, their greed, and the fragile facade that had finally cracked the night before. Julian was at work, but I knew he was replaying every moment in his head, just as I was. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth, and allowed myself a rare moment to reflect. For years, I had hidden behind appearances, mastering the art of subtlety, blending wealth with normalcy. My apartment, modest yet elegant, had always been a sanctuary, a place where I could remove the mask of affluence and just be. The Whitman estate, by contrast, was a monument to excess. Marble floors that gleamed under artificial light, crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen waterfalls, priceless art displayed as much for prestige as for admiration. It was a palace of perfection, but one devoid of soul. Julian called mid-morning. "Mom, something happened at work today." His voice was cautious, almost hesitant. I raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" They were discussing our dinner. Vanessa and Charles. My colleagues overheard snippets of the call Vanessa made after last night. People are talking, and not in our favor. They're spinning stories, trying to paint me as ungrateful or manipulated. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wanted to let things settle, but it feels invasive. I leaned back, closing my eyes. People always try to rewrite reality to suit their own narrative. Let them. Truth has a way of shining through eventually. You did what was right. You were honest. And the rest is noise. Julian sighed, a deep, weary sound. It's strange, Mom. For the first time, I feel proud of standing up. But at the same time, I feel exposed, vulnerable. Like the entire world knows what I'm made of, and some parts of me are raw, unguarded. That's exactly it, I said. Vulnerability is the crucible of strength. You only grow when the pretense falls away. They tried to control us, to manipulate through wealth, but in doing so, they revealed their own weakness. And we saw it. We don't need to hide anymore. I paused, thinking about how the night had unfolded. Each whispered comment from Vanessa, each subtle attempt at manipulation, had been a test, and they had failed spectacularly. The true shock, however, was watching Julian recognize it himself. His awakening was even more satisfying than my own revelations. By afternoon, I had resolved to take a step I had long considered but never acted upon. I would confront Vanessa and Charles directly, not with fury, but with clarity. Not to humiliate, but to establish boundaries that could never be crossed again. I drafted a careful message, measured yet firm. We need to speak. Not as children to parents, but as equals. Your behavior last night exposed truths that cannot be ignored. I expect honesty, acknowledgement, and respect. Anything less is unacceptable. I hit send. The response came almost immediately. Vanessa's message was defensive, laced with guilt and anger. "Aurora, you don't understand. You're blowing things out of proportion. We only want what's best for Julian." I didn't reply. Charles's message was cold, legalistic. "We are disappointed in your judgment. Consider the implications on our family's legacy." I set my phone aside. Legacy. Control. Money. All words meant to intimidate, to coerce. I had seen through their veil, and nothing they could say would unsettle me. Not now. Not ever again. Later, Julian returned home, exhaustion lining his face, but his eyes held resolve. "Mom, I've made my decision. The wedding, we can't proceed. I've never been more certain about anything in my life." I nodded. "I knew you would see it for yourself. And now you're free to build your life, your future, without compromise or fear." He collapsed into the sofa, running his hands through his hair. It's terrifying and liberating. I feel like I've been living in a fog, and now the air is clear. But it's a lot to process. "You'll adjust," I said. It's natural to feel disoriented when the truth replaces illusion. But clarity is worth the discomfort. That evening, I dressed for a small meeting at a law office, nothing grand, just Julian and I signing documents to formally cancel the engagement and delineate boundaries with Vanessa and Charles. The office was modern, sleek, and neutral, a sharp contrast to the ornate chaos of the Whitman mansion. Every detail mattered, pen in hand, signature line highlighted, documents precise. This was closure, control, freedom. Julian looked at me across the table, gratitude and admiration in his eyes. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. For last night, for today, for everything. You don't need to, I said. You already gave me everything I could want: trust, honesty, and the willingness to stand for what's right. The receptionist cleared her throat, reminding us that the documents were ready. As we signed, I felt a wave of liberation wash over me. Each pen stroke was symbolic, a line drawn against manipulation, greed, and pretense. Each initial affirmed our commitment to integrity and self-respect. Afterward, we stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights sparkled, indifferent yet beautiful, reminding me that life moved forward regardless of conflict or wealth. Julian exhaled, releasing tension I hadn't even realized he was holding. I feel alive, he said softly. And that, my son, is the reward for courage and truth, I replied. Remember it always. As we walked home, side by side, I realized that the night had changed everything. Not just the Whitmans' perception of us, but our perception of ourselves. We had faced manipulation, greed, and control and emerged unbroken, unafraid, and wiser. And in that moment, I understood fully: wealth can never buy character, money can never guarantee love, and pretense can never replace truth. Julian had seen it. I had lived it. And now we were free to build a life grounded not in fear, obligation, or appearance, but in authenticity, love, and self-respect. The sky had darkened into a deep indigo as I stepped into the Whitman estate once more. Julian insisted I come, not as a participant in their games, but as the one holding the truth. The mansion loomed ahead, marble steps gleaming under the soft glow of exterior lights, fountains whispering like artificial rivers, and the front door, polished to perfection, reflecting a life that was immaculate but hollow. I paused at the threshold, adjusting my simple silk coat over my understated dress. Julian's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Are you sure about this, Mom? He asked, concern etched across his youthful face. I turned to him, my smile calm, almost serene. Yes, Julian. It's time they see everything. No pretenses, no masks, no illusions. Only the truth. And they need to hear it from me, once and for all. The door swung open before I could knock, revealing Vanessa. Her expression was a tightrope of polite anger and suppressed panic. Behind her, Charles's eyes were sharp, calculating, but something flickered recognition, maybe fear. They had never expected me to return, certainly not with the authority and composure I now carried. Aurora, Vanessa said, her voice attempting warmth, but failing under the tension. We didn't expect you again. I imagine not, I replied, stepping inside without hesitation. The foyer, with its gilded frames and imported rugs, smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive perfume. But to me, it reeked of arrogance. Julian stayed slightly behind me, silent but firm, his presence a pillar of support. I could feel the subtle shift in energy. Vanessa and Charles were no longer controlling. They were cautious, tentative, aware that I now held the upper hand. May I offer you a drink? Vanessa asked, her tone strained. No, thank you, I said. I'm not here for comfort or hospitality. I'm here for clarity, and to establish boundaries that must never be crossed again. Charles cleared his throat. Aurora, perhaps we should discuss. I'll make it simple, I interrupted, voice steady, cutting through the false calm of the room. Your attempts to manipulate, control, and judge my son and me through wealth and appearances are unacceptable. Julian and I are not here to be measured, evaluated, or exploited. Any attempts to undermine that understanding moving forward will result in immediate consequences. Vanessa's lips tightened, and Charles's jaw clenched. I could see them calculating, searching for leverage that simply didn't exist. Consequences? Vanessa asked cautiously. Yes, I said. Wealth can never buy character, nor can it command respect. You've tried to use both to intimidate, to coerce, and to control. It ends tonight. I stepped closer, allowing my presence to fill the room and let a subtle truth ripple through them. Do you know why I pretended to be poor that night at dinner? Because I wanted to see your true selves, to observe how you'd react to someone you perceived as beneath you. And you revealed everything: greed, condescension, and entitlement. You measured worth by money, not heart. And Julian saw it. I saw it. The illusion is over. Vanessa's face paled slightly, and Charles finally shifted his weight, an almost imperceptible tremor betraying his discomfort. Aurora, that's unfair. We just. Unfair? I repeated, voice calm but icy. No. What was unfair was your entire approach to my son's life, your insistence that respect and love must be earned through financial demonstration. That is what is unfair. That is what is unacceptable. And now it stops. Julian stepped forward, a quiet strength in his stance. Mom's right, he said. We set boundaries. No comments about money. No manipulations. No control. If you cannot respect that, you will not be part of our lives beyond necessity. It's final. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Their empire, their illusion of control, was crumbling in front of them, and neither knew how to respond. For the first time, they were powerless in a situation they had always dominated. I allowed the silence to stretch, letting my words settle like stones in their minds. Then I revealed the subtle weight of my own truth. Julian and I are secure, independent, and wealthy in ways that cannot be measured by your standards. My wealth does not define me, but it protects me and, by extension, Julian. And I assure you, it will not be used to play into your hands. Vanessa's voice was trembling now. You could have been one of us. Part of our family. And I was never meant to be, I said softly. Because family is not a status symbol. It is integrity, trust, and mutual respect. Those are things I will not compromise, no matter the cost. A long, heavy silence fell. Charles finally exhaled, as if releasing a century of tension. We understand, he said, though the words felt hollow, devoid of conviction. I nodded once. Good. Then remember this night. Remember what you said, how you acted, and how easily I saw through it. Let it be the lesson you never forget. Respect is earned, not purchased. Love is given freely, not manipulated. With that, I turned to Julian. Shall we go? He smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. Yes, Mom. We walked out together, leaving Vanessa and Charles staring after us, the grandeur of their home suddenly feeling empty, fragile, and inconsequential. The night air was crisp and invigorating as we stepped into freedom, a life unchained from manipulation, greed, and control. And in that moment, I knew that the final confrontation had cemented not just boundaries, but the clarity of our values. The Whitmans could no longer define our lives. We would build our future on our own terms, rooted in truth, respect, and love riches no amount of money could ever buy. The night air felt different that evening. Cooler, clearer, almost like the world itself had paused to breathe after the storm we had left behind at the Whitman estate. Julian and I walked side by side along the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting softly off the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. The tension that had clung to me like a heavy cloak for weeks was gone, replaced by a rare, profound sense of freedom. Mom, Julian began hesitantly, do you think they will ever understand? I shook my head gently. Not truly. Some people never see beyond their own needs. But it doesn't matter. We've said what needed to be said. We've drawn our lines. That is enough. We passed a small cafe, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, and I thought of the contrast between our lives and theirs. The Whitman mansion, all grandeur and opulence, had looked impressive from afar, but inside, it had been hollow. And this street, lined with small businesses and modest homes, felt alive, authentic, and real. There was honesty here. People smiled without calculating the worth of others. There was a rhythm to life that didn't depend on showing off, and it reminded me why I had pretended to be poor in the first place, to see the truth of character, untainted by wealth. Julian smiled faintly. I think I understand now, Mom. Why you did all of this. Why you tested them. It was never about proving something to them, was it? No, I said, my voice soft. It was about protecting you, showing you the values that matter. That real worth is measured in integrity, in how we treat others, in the choices we make. Money can buy comfort, luxury, and appearances, but it cannot buy respect, love, or peace. Those are earned, nurtured, and cherished. We reached our favorite bench in the park, overlooking a small pond where ducks floated lazily in the water. I sat down, stretching my legs, feeling the weight of the past days lift completely. Julian joined me, leaning back, his gaze lost in the reflections on the water. Mom, he said quietly, I've never felt prouder of you. Not just for what you did, but for who you are. You didn't need to prove anything. You just were. I smiled, touched by his words. Thank you, Julian. That means more than anything. The park was peaceful, the sounds of the city softened by distance and night. I allowed myself a small smile as I remembered the Whitmans' faces, the disbelief, the shock, the futile attempts to regain control. It was satisfying, yes, but the true reward was seeing Julian understand the lesson in all of it. That wisdom, that sense of moral clarity, would guide him in every choice he made from now on. Do you think Simone will ever truly change? Julian asked after a long pause. I believe she can, I replied thoughtfully. But change takes time, consistency, and the courage to confront habits that have been reinforced for years. She has to want it, and she must learn to separate her parents' values from her own. But I have hope. Hope because I've seen the impact of honest confrontation. People can surprise you when faced with their own reflections. Julian nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I think I'll try to teach her what you taught me. About integrity, about boundaries, about seeing people for who they are, not what they have. That's all I could ever hope for, I said, reaching out to place my hand over his. To see you grow, to see you choose the right path, and to know that you're equipped to live a life that matters, a life built on principles, not appearances. We sat in silence for a while, letting the night enfold us, each lost in our own thoughts. I realized that, for the first time in years, I felt completely free. Free from the pressures of hiding who I was. Free from the need to navigate the superficial judgments of others. Free to live honestly, fully, and peacefully. Eventually, Julian stood. Come on, Mom. Let's go home. We have a life to live, unchained by anyone else's illusions. I stood as well, taking one last look at the pond, the ducks gliding over the water, unbothered by the world around them. Their simple, honest existence mirrored the life I had fought to protect, one where authenticity mattered more than wealth and love more than appearances. Back in our apartment, I settled into my familiar sofa, the comforting scent of home wrapping around me. I poured myself a cup of tea, savoring the quiet, the peace, the freedom. Julian joined me, and we sat together without speaking, letting the warmth of our bond fill the room. My phone buzzed softly, a message from Julian. Mom, thank you for everything. I love you more than I can say. I smiled, my heart full. I replied simply, I love you too, always. And in that moment, I understood completely. True wealth was never in money or possessions. It was in love, in integrity, in freedom, and in the courage to be oneself. And I had it in abundance. The Whitmans, with all their wealth, were left with only themselves. And Julian and I, we had everything that truly mattered. I leaned back, sipping my tea, and allowed myself to breathe fully for the first time in years. The storm had passed. The truth had been told. And for the first time, I could live unreservedly, unapologetically, and entirely free. And that, I realized, was priceless. Have you ever had to face people who judged you only for what you had, not who you were? Or had a moment where you had to reveal the truth to protect yourself or someone you love? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about integrity, honesty, and the true meaning of wealth. If this story moved you, give it a heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories full of suspense, life lessons, and emotional twists. Your support helps me keep bringing stories that inspire and empower. And remember, the richest people aren't always the ones with the most money. Sometimes they're the ones who live with truth, courage, and love.